The Federal Reserve cutting rates by 50 basis points. We're now bringing in Thomas Hoenig, former Kansas City Fed president and CEO, and Mercatus Center Distinguished Senior Fellow. Thomas, it is good to see you. So the Fed does deliver a supersized cut, Thomas. Was that your expectation?
Well, no, it was not. I thought they would be more cautious. And I'm somewhat disappointed, excuse me, I'm somewhat disappointed by it. But I think based on this, they've taken a little bit of a victory lap. They're thinking inflation's pretty much down. I look at CPI inflation, it's still 2.5% year over year, and core 3.2. I'm not quite sure they should be taking that victory lap, but it's their choice, and I think it will certainly stimulate the economy. And I suspect it may even stimulate some future inflation.
So then, Thomas, given those risks that you see because of this 50 basis point cut, that is there a higher risk? I think you would say yes, maybe, then we could see a reversal down the road, and that they would eventually be forced to hike, given the fact that this could actually be a bit stimulus here for the economy.
Well, I think that's a possibility, number one, because they've done 50 basis points. That makes the next 50 basis points, this 50 basis points that the market was expecting by at least year end, a much higher probability. There's going to be a fair amount of stimulus around that, I suspect. The stock market is close to historic highs. Labor market, while everyone talks about the unemployment rate increasing, it's 4.2% in an historical context. That's still very low. And initial unemployment claims still remain low. So there's a lot of remaining momentum in the economy, although the consumer is slowing, and everyone is aware of that. But I think we'll see how that plays out. It may be temporary as wages continue to hopefully catch up with the price increases that they've had to endure, and we'll see how the economy moves from here. But I think further cuts are now being weighed in much more likely, and therefore some more stimulus coming towards the economy, and perhaps a little slower reduction in the inflation rate, or even a stalling out.
And Thomas, now we await Jay Powell's presser. What do you want to hear from the Fed chief?
Well, I think he'll be asked probably as many times that there are media in there. What is your next move? What can we expect? What would cause you to do another 50 basis point? Are you going to go back to 25 basis point? There'll be a lot of questions around that as he moves through that press conference, I would suspect.
Thomas, do you think this decision could be viewed as politically driven? Because that was a big question, a big concern going into this. And now that we do have 50 basis point cut happening less than 2 months ahead of the election, is that a risk? Should that be viewed as a risk?
Well, I think it's a risk. I don't know that was their motive. It's hard to know what was going on inside that meeting. But I think some people will interpret it very much as a political move. But that'll play out over time. I don't know the individuals thinking as they went into this 50 basis point. Some of them I know, even ahead of this, were very convinced 50 basis point was the right number. Not all were, but we'll see. We'll just see how it plays out in the political frame.
Thomas, you were the former Kansas City Fed president. I'm interested, how do you imagine it played out in that room as they were making this historic decision here?
Well, I think yesterday was spent talking about the economy a great deal. What are you seeing across the regions? Are we seeing a slowdown? Are you seeing inflation coming down more quickly than perhaps we initially thought? That debate went on back and forth yesterday, and then today was about policy and should we do a 50 point or 25? There had to be a pretty strong consensus around that, but particularly the chairman who leads that discussion must have been convinced before he went into that meeting the 50 basis point was the right number. And so he spent a fair amount of time after listening to everyone, talking to them before the meeting, and then laying out the fact that this would be 50 basis points, and perhaps talking about how they would proceed from here. And that conversation would be pretty hard to anticipate. We may get a better picture of that during the press conference that's coming up, how they're thinking forward and how much he's willing to disclose.
All right, Thomas. Thomas, great to get your insight on a day like today. Thomas Hoenig, former Kansas City Fed president and CEO. Thanks so much for joining us here today.